Blessed be your name, the land that is plentiful, where the streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name, abound in the desert place, or walk through the wilderness. Blessed be your name. You pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be your name, the sun's shining down on me, the world's all as it should be. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name, the road marked with suffering, glorious pain in the offering. Blessed be your name. You pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Give and take away. Give and take away. My heart will choose to say, oh, blessed be your name. Blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I'm gonna say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name, Jesus. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Give and take away. Give and take away. My heart will choose to say, oh, blessed be your name.
Let us pray. Lord God, we sometimes fail to talk about you, think about you, or even pray to you. Forgive us when we do that here in this place. Forgive us when we do that at home. Forgive us when we do that at work. Forgive us when we do that at school. Forgive us when we do that in our hearts. Thank you speaking to us, for thinking about us, for being with us, even when we push you away. Thank you for your faith in us. Let live into that faith. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Find in me an obedient heart.
trade. At its simplest form, right? It's the exchanging of things of value, right? So, how do you determine what things are worth, though? How do you decide what's being exchanged is right?
If somebody's willing to exchange.
Okay, willingness, sure.
The need for it?
Need for it, that can affect your will, can it? Yeah, sure can.
Look it up on
Look it up on eBay. So, well, and while we're on the subject of will, I mean, what is at the root of will? What makes you want something? What makes you feel like you need something? Advertising?
Desire.
Well, let me ask it this way. If I exchange something for something else, which of those items determines the value of the transaction?
How much you willing to?
How much you're willing to exchange? So, like, if I wanted to trade my iPad for your glasses, is that a good exchange?
Not for me.
Not for you?
And it depends on the person, because if somebody says this guitar is $1,000 and somebody's not interested in guitar, say, not worth it to me, I'd say, oh, it's worth it. So I'm just saying it depends on what you value.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to pick on my in-laws for a second, because they're in the antiquing business, right? And that's basically their work, is trying to figure out what are people's will, what do people want. You know, because the book can say it's one thing, and they can watch, you know, Antique Roadshow, and they can say it's one thing, but until somebody actually pays the money, you know, how do you determine what the value of the transaction is? Now, you guys have heard it said, learn a trade, right? You've heard that, haven't you? And what does that mean? Learn a skill, sure.
But you can make money with it.
Yeah, so how do you know if your skill is worth anything?
If somebody's willing to pay for it.
If someone's willing to pay for it?
I mean, if you learn how to make pottery and something.
I mean, because is speaking, well, is speaking English a skill?
Yes.
You might not pay you for it.
Yeah, so is speaking English then not really valuable?
Depends on where you're at. If you're in China, it might not be valuable.
Wait a minute, so you're telling me that something of value might have something more to do than with just money? How do you decide what something is worth? How do you decide what has value? What is it that makes a trade valuable? And who decides what your skills are worth? Is it you or is it the world?
The market.
The market. Demand.
The market? Let me look. Wait, say what? So now we come down, did y'all hear what she said? What if something has sentimental value? That doesn't have anything to do with what the world thinks it's worth. Right? I was watching Guardians of the Galaxy, and he ransacked this prison after they had just started to break out, and he went back to go after this Walkman, this beat-up Walkman that had this beat-up cassette tape on it, and when they saw that that's what he went back for, they said, "You are an idiot." But it was his mom's, and his mom gave it to him, and it was important to him. It had value. It had value. I think what we find in terms of trying to determine whether our skills or something that we have or something, well, who we are, has value, that's really determined by you. Because even if someone's willing to pay for what it is you have, are you willing to part with it? You have to decide whether or not what they're giving you is worth what you have or who you are. You are the one who decides whether or not something is worth anything. Thus, worth is wrapped up in our beliefs. It is. There's a scene in The Dark. How many of you have seen The Dark Knight? Okay, this isn't really really a spoiler. But so at one point, the Joker is talking to another criminal, and there's this huge pile of money behind them, and he is throwing gasoline on this fire, and he's about to set it on fire, and the other criminal is incredulous. And he looks at him and he says, "You only care about money. This city deserves a different class of criminal." Now, what was he saying? He was saying that, for the Joker, that money didn't have any leverage whatsoever. But for that other criminal, it had all the leverage in the world. But all of that was rooted in what they believed. And what you think has value is rooted in what you believe. What you think is worth doing. What you think is worth saying. The kind of God that you feel like is worth believing in, all of that is wrapped up in your beliefs. And so here comes the $64 million question. What then influences your beliefs?
What if I think that's a 32?
Yeah, right? I mean, because look, is it evidence? Is it circumstance? Does perspective affect your beliefs? What about other people? Your upbringing, maybe. Does money influence your beliefs? How about convenience? I mean, believe me, when I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the gas prices, and then I'm looking at my needle, and it's past the E, suddenly the prices do not matter to me as much. My beliefs change. I believe I'll stop. What about safety? Does safety affect your beliefs? Do you think safety affected Christ's beliefs?
No, he's on mission.
No,
No.
because he went into places that he knew that he could be killed, persecuted.
Sure.
And he still did that, knowing that what the outcome was going to be for him. He didn't change.
So was that about belief or was that about courage? Because he still went to the Garden of Gethsemane and said, "Hey God, if this can go a different way, that would be all right."
That was the human part of it. He knew.
What about strength? Does strength affect your beliefs?
Yes.
How so?
If you're the kind of person that's easily influenced by other people around you and they're non-believers, and if you want to be a believer and they're very good at what they do, they're going to pull you away from what you believe, and you just don't have the strength to hold your ground.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's one strength. Is flexibility a strength?
Yes.
How do you decide when that is? And by the way, is knowledge something that affects your beliefs?
Yes.
Is it? Because why sometimes do we act even against what we know to be the better path?
Well, we just do it.
I mean, I am living proof, right? That I can have had classes with 3 nutritionists. I can go through all kinds of programs, and I am still going to have that chocolate milkshake. Knowledge. What about desire? Does desire affect what you believe? What about peace? What about love? What about mercy? What about grace? By the time we get to this part in the letter of Acts, this is chapter 18, Paul has been on a roller coaster ride of experiences, all that have been impinging and affecting his beliefs. We begin with verse 1. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he found a Jew named Aquila, and a native of Pontus. He had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. This is the emperor. Paul visited with them, and because they practiced the same trade, he stayed and worked with them. And they all worked with leather. Okay, so they all worked the same trade. They all worked with leather. Paul famously is a tent maker. And so, what they did seemed to have value for folks, and so they could do what they were doing and exchange that for some money to support other things that they were doing, right? Namely, their activities trying to spread the gospel. And, they did so basically in the market, right? They made exchanges. They made trades. How many of you know anything about the stock market? Okay. And how many trades can you make a day?
As many as you have every second.
Yeah, if you have the cash, you can make as many trades as you want. But if you're doing the trades on an account, which they call a margin, how many can you make? Yeah, not nearly that many. It's limited. But in the end, you're really limited by what other people are willing to trade with you. Which means you come all the way back around to belief. Does the person that you're trading with think that you have something of value? I mean, have you ever been to a bazaar? One of those crazy marketplaces that has just about everything you can imagine. We call them flea markets here. And, how often do you find something that you just really need? How often do you find something that you want? And how often have you been talked into thinking that you really did want this thing? Tom. No, I'm kidding. Mostly. But I mean, but that's why I'm saying it really is about belief. It's not about value or whether or not something is worth something. What's it worth to you? That's the question. And it's the same question that we run into even when the trade that we're making is the gospel. This is chapter 18, and now we're moving into verses 4 through 5. Every Sabbath, Paul interacted with the people in the synagogue, trying to convince both Jews and Greeks. Once Silas and Timothy arrived in Macedonia, Paul devoted himself fully to the word, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. So up until this point, he's working, he's doing the leather with Priscilla and Aquila, and he's doing that part-time, but now that his compatriots have arrived, he's ready to break down and get on with it and go full-time, working the gospel, and he's always doing the same pattern, if you follow the scriptures. He always goes to the synagogue first, tries to deal with the Jews in question, and then when they reject him, he moves on to the Gentiles and then deals with them. He does it almost everywhere he goes. Now, as a Christian, how many jobs do you have, do you think? How many jobs do you have?
Just to be a Christian, you mean?
As a Christian, how many jobs do you have? 3? Anybody for 3? As many as you want to take on? Really?
I'm sure things you could do.
I'll say one.
1? Like what?
Just do God's will. That's the job.
So your job is to do God's will. Okay?
Love each other.
To love each other. So 2? Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. But what do those jobs look like? And by the way, let's assume it's your two. Which one of those is part-time? And of your plethora of jobs, which one of those is part-time? As a Christian, what part of your work, what part of your job is part-time?
I sing part-time.
You sing part-time? Okay. Okay. We think sometimes, I don't know, you hear the language sometimes that our Christian faith is a vocation. You ever heard that before? This idea that it's work that we've been assigned by God to do. And really, we're being pretty specific when we talk about that. Sometimes we're talking about singing. Sometimes we're talking about preaching. Sometimes we talk about teaching, which we're going to recognize our teachers tonight. But I mean, but it's a little more than that. Because if we are about sharing the gospel, that's supposed to be not just a full-time job, because a full-time job legally is what?
40 hours.
Yeah, it depends, right, on what state you're in, depends on what rules are going by, but it can be 30 to 40 hours, right? But in terms of being a Christian, that's not just a 30 or 40-hour gig. Yeah. It's supposed to be 24/7. What does Deuteronomy say? Everywhere you work, wherever you sleep, when you're sitting around a dinner table, what? You're supposed to be loving the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. And, as it says in Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. It's a 24/7 gig. There is no part-time when it comes to being a Christian. But what do you do if the circumstances of the job change on you? This is verses 6 through 8 of chapter 18. When they opposed, the folks that Paul was talking to, and slandered him, he shook the dust from his clothes in protest and said to them, "You are responsible for your own fate. I'm innocent. From now on, I'll go to the Gentiles." And he left the synagogue, and he went next door to the home of Titius Justus, a Gentile God worshiper. Crispus, the synagogue leader, and his entire household came to believe in the Lord. Many Corinthians believed and were baptized after listening to Paul. So the job changed. There he is, he's in a synagogue, he's talking to the Jews, they reject him, so he shakes the dust off his feet and he goes to the Gentiles. The job changed, but the value of the trade didn't change. Because in those exchanges, what was Paul's trade? What was the job?
Spreading the gospel.
Spreading the gospel. Where it actually landed was not his responsibility. Who actually believed was not his responsibility. But sharing the gospel is his responsibility. And so it doesn't matter who he's talking to, it's still the job. It doesn't matter where he lives, it's still the job. It doesn't matter whether or not he's gainfully employed, it's still the job. And it doesn't matter what your life circumstance is. It is always the job to be spreading the gospel. That is our trade. And look, Paul's pattern mimicked God's. It did. Because God chose the Jews and dealt with them, gave them the 10 Commandments, gave them the laws, showered them with love, gave them all the grace that you can imagine, even gave them the Ark of the Covenant, gave them the Promised Land. And what did Israel do with all of that? They did a big reject, right? And then even after they got exiled, and Jeremiah's telling them, look, it's all changed. It's not about the land. It's all about here. What did they do with that? I mean, here's Jesus. He's sitting there. The Syrophoenician woman is coming, and his disciple says, send her away. She's getting on her nerves. And so Jesus turns to her and he says, listen, stop yelling. I've been sent here for the Jews. It's not right to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. And that woman says what? Well, look, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the children's table. And I can just imagine Jesus standing there and going, huh. Because then he says, for that answer, your daughter is healed. And from that point on in the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of Matthew, where that story also is located, he deals not just with Jews, he deals with everyone. When Paul gets rejected by the synagogues that he deals with, he doesn't just deal with Jews, he ends up dealing with everyone. Wherever you find yourself sharing the gospel, spreading the good news, and you find people rejecting it, what are you supposed to do then? Share it. Yeah, find somebody else. Share it with everyone. And sharing the gospel isn't just about the words. It's about the work of the gospel. The things the gospel was intended to accomplish. This is Acts chapter 18, and now verses 9 to 11. One night the Lord said to Paul in a vision, don't be afraid. Continue speaking. Don't be silent. I'm with you, and no one who attacks you will harm you, for I have many people in this city. So he stayed there for 18 months, teaching God's word among them. Paul is betting his life on the belief that God is a reliable trading partner. He's putting everything on this idea that he can spread the gospel and God is going to back him up. And so the real question is, are you? Are we? Think of the lavish promises that God makes with us. I will always be with you. I will love you unconditionally. My salvation is offered to you freely. But what's the trade? What is God getting in exchange with us? With all that God has blessed you with all that God has offered to you, what is the exchange? What is God getting in trade? And why, oh why, does God believe that we are so valuable? Valuable enough for Jesus to die? What is it about us that God thinks is so worth it? And it must make God wonder why we don't agree. Because as it turns out, we give God reasons to ditch us every day. And God chooses to stay with us. God gives us reasons to stay with faith, to trade in faith every day. Will we work full time, or will we satisfy and justify ourselves with being part-time Christians? Or will we demonstrate that the exchange that God is getting for all that God has given to us is worth it? My brothers and sisters in Christ, my prayer is that we would indeed trade in faith, and in so doing, be faithful. Amen.
Hey, Billy.
May the peace of Christ be
Also with you, my friend.
May the peace of Christ be with you.
Hey, Brad.
We're not giving God money or heaven tickets or any advantage. Our tithes, gifts, participation, attendance, and offerings should be given cheerfully out of thanks for what God has already given us through God's presence in our life as Creator, Christ, and Holy Ghost, pressing us to do our jobs and to be habitual converts.
strength to rise from the ashes and make a new beginning. Anyone can feel the ache. You think it's more than you can take, but you're stronger, stronger than you know. Don't you give up now. The sun will soon be shining. Gotta face the clouds, find the silver lining. I sing dreams that move the mountains, hope that doesn't ever end, even when the sky is falling. I sing miracles just happen, silent prayers get answered, broken hearts become brand new. That's what faith can do. Doesn't matter what you've heard, impossible is not a word. It's just a reason for someone not to try. Everybody's scared to death when they decide to take that step out on the water. It will be alright. Life is so much more than what your eyes are seeing. You will find your way if you keep believing. I sing dreams that move the mountains, hope that doesn't ever end, even when the sky is falling. I sing miracles just happen, silent prayers get answered, broken hearts become brand new. That's what faith can do. Overcome the odds, you don't have a chance. That's what faith can do. If the world says you can, it'll tell you that you can. I sing dreams that move the mountains, hope that doesn't ever end, even when the sky is falling. I sing miracles just happen, silent prayers get answered, broken hearts become brand new. That's what faith can do. That's what faith can do. Even if you fall sometimes, you will have the strength to rise.
Lord, take these gifts offered in earnest, multiply them according to your purposes, that they may serve your ends, and in the process, make us a part of the blessing you mean for the world. Amen.
All right, let's stand up. We're going to sing.
I'll say, Lord, it's you gave me life and I can explain just how much you mean to me now that you have saved me, Lord. Give all that I am to you,
turns out we give God reasons to ditch us every day, and God chooses to stay with us. God gives us reason to stay with faith, to trade in faith every day. Will we work full time, or will we satisfy and justify ourselves with being part-time Christians? Now get up, take heart. Jesus is calling you. Go in peace.